Hello everyone and welcome to The Dancer's Edge. My name is Janelle Warren Conwell and today we're going to be talking about 10 tips to learn choreography faster. We're getting into the time of the year where we're really ramping up towards competition season for those of you that are competition dancers, and so you are probably pretty heavy into choreography. I know you've already been learning choreography throughout the year, but at this point in the game, you're probably really focused on learning those last little bits of choreo. So get your dance notebooks out and here we go. My first tip is to learn the music. It's so much easier to understand the movement and understand the choreography and what beats you're supposed to be hitting and when your body's supposed to be doing what if you know the sounds and the beats and the feel of the music. So really listening to the music and understanding where the beats are, where the counts are hitting, where the downbeats are, that's really going to help you understand the timing of the choreography. Tip number 2 is focus. So especially if you've had a few classes in a row or a long day, it can be easy to kind of daydream off and then you come back to reality and you're like, whoa, what just happened? I have no idea what those last 8 counts are. So really make an effort to focus in on what the teacher is saying and what you're doing. And kind of going along with that is tip number 3, to watch different things at different times in the class. So you want to be watching the teacher or the choreographer, so of course that you understand what they're doing, following along with them as they do the choreography. Then you also want to watch yourself in the mirror to see what you're doing and to see if it looks like what the choreographer is doing. And then you want to not watch anybody at all. So what I find is a lot of times you will be watching the choreographer or watching the other people in your class, and that will really help you to know what's coming up or what you're doing. But then as soon as you are at the front of the line or not looking at anybody, sometimes that can throw you for a bit of a loop and not understand what you're doing. So one of the things that I like to do when I'm taking a class is I'll watch the choreographer, watch myself, and then any little breaks or anything like that I get in between the movements, or the moments like where the teacher is going to go start the music or something like that, I'll turn away from everybody and try and do the choreo just on my own from my memory, from the muscle memory that I have, not looking at anybody. And I find that really, really helps to solidify the choreo. Tip number 4 is say the counts or the movement sounds as you're doing them. So your choreographer or teacher is probably either using counts or they're using a sound to describe the movement. Sometimes I use counts and sometimes I use sounds. Anyone that's ever taken my class knows that, there's a lot of sound and vocabulary that goes on. And I find it really, really helpful as you're practicing on your own to say the things like the counts or the sounds in the same emphasis that the teacher has done. That really helps you remember the movement. So let's say it was like 1 and 2, ka and boom. So doing that as you're doing the choreography, as you're practicing, like 1 and 2, ka and boom. That actually really helps you to remember the movement. So saying the counts or sounds either in your head or out loud is tip number 4. Tip number 5 is to practice the combo from the previous section. So a lot of times we get focused on the section that we're doing at the moment and forget about either like the beginning or the middle of the combo. So make sure you're linking everything together so you don't forget about what happened before. So instead of just practicing the part that you are learning at the moment, link it all together, start from the top or start from a few counts beforehand. Tip number 6 is to keep moving. Now, I know this may be hard for all you perfectionists out there, and I know we have a lot of perfectionists who are dancers, but if there's a spot that you're not getting and the choreographer or teacher is moving along really, really quickly, you can always come back to that movement. And if you get too stuck on that, then you kind of lose everything that's coming after that. So if there's something that you're not grasping, just put it on the back burner, and when you get a second, you can either ask the teacher or ask one of the other dancers beside you for a little help. This way, you won't get behind in all of the movement that comes after that. Tip number 7 is to practice with smaller movements first. So you're not throwing your movement away, and then as you start to understand it, really go full out. So in things that are really fast paced, especially like hip hop or really fast jazz piece, if you try and go full out right away, it can sometimes just mash everything together and you won't understand all of the little subtleties in the movement. So start as you're learning it with smaller movements, so then you can understand what you're doing and what the timing is for everything, what the transfer of weight is, things like that. And then as you start to understand it, go more and more full out. So you're not throwing it away, you're grasping what the movement is, and then definitely also make sure you're going full out as you're practicing it, because if you are learning it and you don't go full out and then all of a sudden you're in the front of the class and have to do it full out, it feels really different and it can throw you off. So do make sure that you practice it full out when you get the chance. Tip number 8 is repetition. Repetition, repetition, repetition. So learning a dance is muscle memory, and the more that you do it, the more that your body is going to know what to do, so you don't have to think about it so much. You want to get to that point where you can focus on just being in the moment and the performance and the feeling and all of that kind of good stuff. And when you're stuck in thinking about what the moves are and what's coming up, then it's really, really hard to be in the moment. So repetition, repetition, repetition. That's how you're going to learn the choreography. Any chance you get to be going over it or practicing it, just constantly going over it and practicing it. Tip number 9 is to take different styles of dance. The more exposure that you have to different styles of dance, it helps expand your vocabulary. So when you're in a class learning choreography, it's easier to pick up because you're familiar with the movement. That movement is already in your body. You have an expanded dance vocabulary and expanded movement vocabulary, and so it makes it a lot easier to pick up the choreography. I know for my students, we this term had an intensive hip hop technique class, and teaching them combos after teaching them all of that hip hop technique made such a huge difference. They were able to pick up the combos way faster and get the movement and just look like they were doing the combo. They were able to understand the movement way faster because they already had that hip hop technique ingrained and had already learned the body movement. So it was way easier for them to pick up that choreo. And my final tip number 10, is to teach it to somebody. I love this tip because I think in order to truly understand something, you do have to teach it to someone, because sometimes that brings up questions from other people, but also from yourself that you didn't even realize that you had. So if you get the chance to teach it to someone or help someone out, definitely do that, because that's going to help you understand the choreography faster. And there you have it, 10 tips for learning choreography faster. I hope you find this helpful. Please leave a review in iTunes or wherever you're listening to this if you did, and let me know what you think. If you have any other questions or thoughts for a podcast, I'd love to hear them. And it also helps other people find this podcast who may be looking for something like this. You can follow me on Instagram at